Hello, I'm Sarah, and welcome back to the Red Lantern. The day Dan was killed, our home was flooded with familiar faces. Friends and family came over to offer love in the ways that they knew how. Some brought hugs, others brought food, some sat and talked, and others quietly cleaned our house. A few even brought their children so my kids would have friendly faces and peers to play with or to talk to. These people were amazing and they did everything right. And I am eternally grateful for their support. That week, my family was thrusted into a big black hole. Our community rallied around us to help pull us up out of it. It felt as though we were frozen in time while everyone and everything flashed by us. Decisions were being made, people were coming and going, and it was all a blur. I think of that week as a still shot, the kind a photographer creates by setting the shutter speed low. The subject stays sharp and frozen while everything behind that subject is moving and becomes a huge blur. That's exactly how I felt. I wasn't living my life. I was actually suspended in it. My kids and I were comforted by everyone. Things were getting done in my house and not by me. I wasn't the one cooking, cleaning, or doing the laundry. With all of that help, small things around my house began to shift. Inconsequential objects were moved as food came in and spaces were tidied. Throughout our marriage, Dan and I had always been each other's teammates. I was used to doing everything with his help, and together we often helped others. So to suddenly be on the receiving end of so much support was incredible. In the weeks that followed Dan's death, I found myself grabbing onto people's hands. It was my quiet way of staying grounded. Without knowing it, they were keeping me from floating away. Dan and I were never materialistic people, but on the 11th of May, 2024, ordinary objects became deeply important to me. Hours after Dan died, I walked into our closet and saw our laundry basket. On top was a pair of red boxers, the ones Dan had worn the night before he was killed. These were the last clothes he took off before putting on his cycle jersey and leaving our house, never to return. These were the last things that he had worn while he was still safe. To this day, those boxers are folded and kept in a special box of things that remind me of Dan. Later that day, I walked by the kitchen sink and I noticed a glass that Dan had used for his morning water. He had sat this glass next to the sink the way he always did. For 26 years, this man had a habit that drove me nuts. He could never quite put the dirty dishes in the sink, only next to it. I used to smile and say to him, "Dan, you're so close. Why can't you just put it in the sink?" I'm grateful that he never broke that habit. Because if he had, I would have washed that glass and lost the faint outline where his bottom lip had touched. I needed to keep that glass, and I needed to keep those red boxers. I also became fiercely territorial over Dan's office. He had been working on several house projects, and his tools were scattered across the floor. Papers and computers covered his desk, and I didn't want any of that touched, not even the trash. And the couch, with its pillows, suddenly became a symbol of the life that we would no longer have. I could still see him lying there, head on a pillow, left leg crossed over his right, thinking through problems for work, solving house projects, or planning our next family adventure. And I wanted everything to stay the same. Then, one day that week, I walked into the kitchen and realized something was missing. A beautiful red vintage tomato tin I had kept by the stove for years. I used it to pour grease into, and it always made me feel connected to one of my grandmothers. When I couldn't find it, I started to cry. I searched the kitchen drawers, the trash, the recycle bin, the refrigerator, and nothing. I couldn't find it anywhere. My oldest daughter and her then fiance saw me frantically looking and asked what was wrong. When I told them, they walked outside and they dug through bags and bags of trash and they found that tin. And they brought it in, washed it for me, and they put it back by the stove. That tomato tin had no monetary value. It wasn't even Dan's, but it represented a permanence to me, a piece of the life we had before May 11th. Losing it felt like losing another piece of that life. Even though my daughter and son in law rescued it that day, that tomato tin eventually disappeared, and for real this time. And to this day, I don't know who threw it away or who misplaced it. And you know what? It just doesn't matter anymore. I now see that those first days and weeks were held together by two things. They were held together by the people who showed up and the ordinary objects that suddenly felt sacred. The hands I held kept me from floating away. The red boxers, the glass with the faint lip mark, the tools left exactly where Dan had placed them, the couch pillows, and even the little red tomato tin. All of them became anchors when everything else felt like it was spinning out of control. But as we know, anchors don't last forever. These symbols that we hold on to slowly leave. Some are lost by accident, some are put away, and some simply fade with time. What remains is quieter and less tangible. The love that flooded our house, for instance, the strength we borrowed from others, and the knowledge that we keep going on even after that last physical reminder is gone. This is where this part of the story ends, not with everything in its place, but with the understanding that we can survive the shedding of items, the shedding of material things. We learn to live without these objects. And as time goes on, it becomes easier to carry that person that these items once belonged to in our hearts and in our minds. So until we meet again, keep living until you feel alive.